Hi there. I want to just do a really quick commentary video on the Trialogos between or amongst Mary, Paul VanderKlay, and John Vervaeke. So first of all, it is really fun to watch these three in Trialogos, because they all have a great sense of humor. They have very different senses of humor, but together they're hilarious. So that's really fun. That's an added layer of quality to this video. So I want to talk about narrative. Here is my conception of narrative. First of all, okay, a story, I think, is right. I think a story is what John says. There is a goal. There's no story without an end. So there has to be a beginning, middle, and end to have a story. But I do think that narrative is different, and it comes before dialogue. So I agree with Mary on this one. So let's look at a child coming into the world. Now, when a child is born, he does not realize that he is separate from his mother's body. He feels like he is the world. He's undifferentiated. He's autonomous. It is complete innocence. It is absolutely non-dual. That is our initial experience, is non-dual. Then comes the separation, where the baby begins to realize I'm separate for what, but what is I'm separate from is what is caring for me. And this is the first notion of dualism, and that in itself, this separation, this differentiation from the mother, is the beginning of narrative. It is our first experience of narrative. And I believe this is why Pajot says we are nested in narrative, because the bases of the constituent elements of experience begin in our perception with that moment of separation from the mother, that differentiation. This is the first narrative. And all narrative stems from that. Heaven and earth, God and man, mother and child, good and bad. That would take a little bit more talking about, and maybe that isn't exactly right, but I think somehow that's right. So this is the basic perception of reality that's illustrated, and I wish I had the book. Those of you who have Mathieu Pajot's book at home, I have it, but not with me right now. There is the first diagram is the separation of heaven and earth. It is the first experience that is outside that non-dual experience. And this is why we see this as the first narrative of the universe, the separation of heaven and earth, Genesis. These patterns mirror our cognitive relationship with reality. And Pajot's patterns mirror our own initial experiences of reality, like I said. So, like Paul said, that is one reason why there is so much meaning packed into the word logos, because it's logos that creates this differentiation, this first narrative. Okay, so the third stage for this baby is dialogos, is dialogue, and this is what John is trying to, I believe, to some extent recreate in the dialogos, and it's very apt. It is the attunement between the mother and the child. It is an absolute connection in the moment, with no ego or anything like that. And this occurs very soon after. But in this model that I'm talking about, which is based on the baby's first experience, this is the model that makes sense to me. So for me, narrative is first, dialogue is second. John mentions Eastern practice, and also Jesus is evoking narrative bashing practices that are meant to put you in a non-dual state. So these narrative bashing practices are putting you back in that initial undifferentiated state. There's a lot of Persig's philosophy is an attempt. One big component of his philosophy is an attempt to marry Eastern and Western understanding. Eastern is non-dual, Western is dualistic. So there's narrative here, non-narrative here. Lots of things you could say about that. So that's just a little bit of what I want to say about Persig's philosophy on that particular point. Then the word teleological is used a lot in this dialogue, and John says that evolution is not teleological. I think this is a well-accepted stance in science in the intellectual realm. In Pirsig, we're talking about the four realms: the inorganic, the biological, the social, and the intellectual. So the theory of evolution exists in the intellectual realm. And in this realm, evolution is not teleological. But because Pirsig operates in all four levels at once, he would say that all patterns of value on all these four levels are evolving towards dynamism, towards more flexibility, towards more freedom, towards freedom from the laws that bind these patterns down in their respective levels. So in the inorganic level, you've got the things like the law of gravity. And the biological level, you've got the law of the jungle, for example. In the social level, you have the laws that society's created. Intellect is dynamic. I don't know how you would characterize the laws of intellect, so I'll wait to hear about that in the comments. So in this sense, Pirsig would say that evolution is teleological. In fact, in chapter 11 of Lila, which we just read a couple weeks ago, he says that the teleological theories of evolution, to him, are more correct because we are evolving, like Lamarck said, towards perfection, towards dynamic quality. Whether we ever reach it or not, that's another thing, because infinity, we're nested in infinity. And right here is why I think Pirsig's philosophy is compatible with theism. This is my opinion, but I think it's compatible with theism because you have this teleological aspect to his evolutionary theory. And the other aspect of that I think is compatible with theism, of course, is that something had to get our universe going by introducing quality. So that powerful Big Bang introduced quality into this infinity and gave us our universe. And maybe I'll get in trouble for saying that, I don't know. Also, one thing John said that was interesting, he said that a tornado doesn't have a purpose, but a paramecium does. So a tornado is an inorganic pattern of value, and paramecium is a set of biological patterns of value. In Pirsig's philosophy, quality is the teleological purpose of all the levels. So inorganic patterns of value are headed towards dynamic quality just as much as biological, just as much as social, etc. So you have this migration towards quality happening on all the levels. So there's that difference. Now there's another part where John describes Dialogos. He describes Dialogos and how he conceives of it, and then that kind of mirrors the way Paul describes having insight while preaching, having him, and this is exactly the kind of dynamic situation that they are putting themselves in, that are creating these quality patterns of value one after another. This is dynamic quality in action when you're in the state. You could call it the flow state if you want. All the traps are removed in Dialogos optimally, and that means the value and ego traps that may come up in regular discussion. Look back at chapter 26 in the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, the Gumshin Chautauqua, which I talk about all the time. The stance that you enter into in Dialogos, you go into it in a state which the psychoanalyst Bion said, without memory or desire. Without memory or desire. This is what you do when you start a psychotherapy session. You go into the session without memory or desire. That's probably an anathema to some types of therapy, but this is the psychodynamic method. That means you go into it without preconceived notions of value or without your ego. This is the peace of mind that Pirsig refers to when beginning motorcycle maintenance, and we all know by now what he means by motorcycle maintenance. So in terms of the levels, let's talk about going into Dialogos. In terms of the levels, you have biological raw emotion, in this case, positive emotion more than likely, prompting the quality communication on the social level and yielding these high quality intellectual patterns of value, which you would call insights, one after another. And this triad is always operating in man at all times. This was pointed out, a very valuable point given to me by Paul Go, is that man is always, these three levels are operating in man at all the time, and they're always interacting with each other and continually expressing themselves. So we're going to start having fun with this concept. The quality, let's look at the quality patterns of value. The quality patterns of value in Dialogos are positive emotion, which is biological, Dialogos itself, which is social, and insight, which is intellectual. Okay, last I'm going to read a quick quote for comment, which I think is related to all of this. I'm not going to comment on it myself. This is for you, dear viewer, to ponder over, let's say. It certainly felt right. Not subject and object, but static and dynamic is the basic division of reality. When A.N. Whitehead wrote that mankind is driven forward by dim apprehensions of things too obscure for its existing language, he was writing about dynamic quality. Dynamic quality is the pre-intellectual cutting edge of reality, the source of all things, completely simple and always new. It contains no pattern of fixed rewards and punishments. Its only perceived good is freedom, and its only perceived evil is static quality itself. Any pattern of one-sided fixed values that tries to contain and kill the ongoing free force of life. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, John. I hope that made sense, and I'll see you next time.